This chapter is about fixing service failure, and to that, we should train and empower your employees to listen with empathy and to find and fix failures. Organizations must find a fair solution, and know how guests determine what is fair. Unhappy guests will tell twice as many people about bad experiences as happy guests will tell about good experiences. Even the best organizations fail a guest occasionally, so they must be prepared for failure and have a recovery strategy in place. Service failure recovery works only if the system works. Even an empowered employee can't recover from service failure without support from the system. When you work to solve the service failure, also work to improve the service delivery system. After reading this chapter, you should understand how guests respond when the guest experience fails to meet their expectations. How organizations should respond when the experience fails to meet guest expectations. Why fixing service failures quickly on the spot, if possible, is so important. Why positive word of mouth is so valuable and bad word of mouth so harmful. Why the recovery method for handling a service failure is so important. How to learn from service failures. How guests evaluate the hospitality organization's recovery efforts. How to match the recovery strategy to the failure. When something goes wrong in the delivery of a service, it is called a service failure. The best way to handle a service failure is to prevent it before it occurs. Quality must be constantly monitored and measured during the delivery phase to minimize failure and ensure success. Measures can be used to collect information during the service delivery processes so that errors can be immediately identified and addressed, or after the service so that systems can be updated, corrected, or improved in such a way that future service is delivered more effectively. But when a failure does occur, steps should be taken to fix it, ideally on the spot, for the guest. When these methods indicate that a guest has experienced a service failure, organizations must find ways to both fix the failure and improve their systems to prevent a recurrence of the failure. Types of service failures. A well-accepted categorization of service failures divides them into 4 types. Service product failures. These include any failure in the core service products, example cold or poorly prepared food, unavailable hotel room, or broken attraction. Service settings, example dirty or smelly rooms, no directional signs, or overly worn carpets, and service systems, example out-of-stock items, inoperative credit card machines, or disorganized servers. Failure to meet explicit or implicit customer requests. These include any inability to provide what guests ask for, such as special requests on menu items, a non-smoker being put in a smoking room, or not honoring a reservation. Failures caused by employee actions or inactions. These include both intentional and unintentional acts such as showing rudeness or bad attitude or not presenting a meal or bill in a timely way. Failures caused by other guests, random events, or circumstances beyond the control of the organization but which guests will still expect to be fixed. Service failures can also occur for a combination of these 4 basic reasons. Regardless of the reason or combination of reasons, a service failure can dramatically reduce customer satisfaction and can have severe negative consequences for the business. In a study that analyzed critical incidents during service encounters to identify the reasons for customers switching to other products or services, 3 common problems emerged. The most common reasons people switched was due to failures in the service itself, such as mistakes committed by staff, technical failures, billing errors, or service catastrophes. The second largest category of service failures involved employees' inappropriate actions, negative attitudes, or bad behaviors. If employees were perceived as uncaring, impolite, rude, irresponsive, uncommunicative, or unknowledgeable, as in inexperienced, untrained, inept, out of date, they failed. The third largest category of reasons why people switched was unsatisfactory employee response to service failure. When employees respond reluctantly, fail to respond with empathy or at all, or offer negative responses. Customer unhappiness is not always the organization's fault. Another source of failure is the customers themselves. Even though the organization does not create these problems, which are often beyond the organization's ability to manage, no matter how much they train their people, perfect their systems and refine their services, the organization must still address them. Organizations that want to keep guest-created service failures from destroying the guest experience and the guests' feelings about the organization build in strategies to help guests recover from their own failures so they can take a positive impression away from the service setting. The best organizations recognize the importance of helping guests solve the problems they create themselves. Excellent organizations help these guests go home happy in spite of themselves. Customers tolerate most small and infrequent errors. They know that things don't work perfectly every time, so they may brush off minor failures. Failures can even include those of which the customer isn't aware. Some customer service experts believe the organization should apologize even for these failures, as they provide an opportunity to wow. Some service recoveries fix the customer's problems, and other recovery efforts make things worse. Sometimes the best a manager can do is to neutralize the angry customer. When a guest has a problem, one of three outcomes usually occurs. The problem is fixed and the formerly unhappy guest leaves happy, the problem isn't fixed and the unhappy guest leaves unhappy, or the organization tries to fix the problem and succeeds only in neutralizing the unhappy guest. The study reports that for some service failures, such as inappropriate server behavior, customers were unforgiving regardless of any effort to recover. For technical failures such as delivery of the wrong order or a problem with the food itself, the customers were more forgiving after recovery attempts and were more likely to return. Being successful in service recovery efforts is critical, because a formerly unhappy guest who leaves happy may tell many others about a terrific experience. An unhappy guest may leave and tell as many others as possible about the terrible experience. A neutralized guest may leave and forget the whole experience and perhaps the organization as well. Frederick F. Reichheld and W. Earl Sasser, Jr., showed that if a company can reduce its rate of customer defections, leaving the organization to go to a competitor. Publicizing this value to employees gives everyone a strong sense of why it is so important to find and fix the service problems that cause customers to switch their support to other companies or use the service less frequently. It costs money to lose a customer. The unhappy or dissatisfied customer is the focus of the service recovery. An unhappy customer can do any one or a combination of 4 actions. Never return. Complains. Badmouth the organization. Retaliate. Worst case scenario, customer leaves vowing never to return, does not complain to the organization, switches to another service provider, badmouths the organization, and finds a way to retaliate. The value of positive publicity, badmouth versus wow. This positive word of mouth has great value, not only for influencing others to go to a destination, but also for blunting negative word of mouth. If a potential customer hears strong testimonials or reads the blogs about a guest experience from 3 trusted friends, disregarding a complaining avenger will be easier. Credibility. People who tell other people tend to be more credible than impersonal or anonymous testimonials. Richness of the detailed personal experience of a friend is more compelling than any commercial advertisement. Evangelists. Guests who get this kind of red carpet treatment may become evangelists who spread the company word far and wide. How the recovery is handled. The organization trying to recover from failure can impress the customer positively or negatively. After a failure, the organization can either end up much better off or much worse off, depending on the customer's reaction to the recovery attempt. A small problem can become a big problem if the recovery effort is half-hearted or misguided. The researchers discovered that the most important determinant of overall customer satisfaction after a service failure was customers' satisfaction with those responsible for dealing with failure, the personnel responsible for the service interaction. The organization's ability to recover from failure also had the largest impact on willingness to return and repatronize. Service recovery, a message to employees. Addressing service failure well has one more important outcome. It tells the employees how committed the organization is to customer satisfaction. Employees need to know that this commitment is more than a slogan. How the organization finds and fixes its service errors is a loud message to the employees about what the organization truly does believe in. How the organization handles service recovery will also impact employee morale and satisfaction with the organization. Looking for service failures. The complaint as a monitoring device. The research shows clearly that the most important process strategy is to get unhappy guests to complain while they are still in the guest experience. Organizations must let their guests know they and their employees are receptive to complaints. Research on this issue has identified some important ways in which the organization can encourage and recognize customer complaints. Encouraging complaints. All service personnel should be trained and encouraged to solicit complaints. Since many service problems involve server errors, getting the servers to solicit complaints about their own performance may be a challenge. Body language as a complaint. Service personnel can be trained to read body language for clues to an unhappy guest. Employees must also learn how to be receptive and sympathetic to the complaint once it is elicited. Guests must perceive employees as interested and concerned. If guests do not think anyone cares, they generally won't say anything. Don't forget to ask. The most basic way to find out if there is a service problem is to simply ask the guest, "Was everything okay?" Though there are a number of more sophisticated options like comment cards, toll-free 800 numbers, surveys, focus groups, and reports from mystery shoppers. If the guest says no, be prepared to follow up and try to resolve the service failure. Ne cares, they generally won't say anything. The organization failed. It got the guests in the door, and then it let them down. Now what? Organizations should train their employees to handle and empower them to creatively resolve the problems when they find them. Just as umpires can be trained to recognize balls and strikes through watching videos, hospitality personnel can be trained to recognize service errors and taught how to correct the failures they find. Do something quickly. The Ritz-Carlton is famous for empowering its employees to find and fix failures. Here are 3 of the Ritz-Carlton basics, carried by every employee. Any employee who receives a customer complaint owns the complaint. React quickly to correct the problem immediately. Follow up with a telephone call within 20 minutes to verify that the problem has been resolved to the customer's satisfaction. Do everything you possibly can to never lose a guest. Every employee is empowered to resolve the problem and to prevent a repeat occurrence. The higher the cost of the failure to the guest in terms of money, personal reputation, or safety, the more vital it is for the organization to train the server to recognize and deal with it promptly, sympathetically, and effectively. Benefits of quick recovery. Solving a problem up front instead of over time reduces the overall expense of retaining guests. The sooner the guest is satisfied, the more likely the guest will remain with the organization, and the sooner the organization will benefit from the guest's repeat business. Fix their problems and most guests will come back. Fix their problems on the spot and there is a very good chance that they will not only come back but will also likely recommend the organization to their friends. Reward programs and recognition for employees who have done an especially good job of recovering from a service failure offer strong incentives to other employees while providing role models of the organization's commitment to service quality. An overall strategy for failure analysis will serve the guestologist seeking to prevent any guest from being disappointed. Figure 13:1 presents a model that describes how managers should analyze their failures and their efforts at failure recovery. This figure shows that analyzing and correcting service failures has 7 steps. The first 3 steps involve failure analysis, while the last 4 steps involve the recovery effort. First step is to identify the failures. Second step is to put them into categories for further analysis. These steps require organizations to be on watch for service failures and to have a system in place to document and track any errors that occur. Third step is to assign reasons for each type of failure, attributing them to who was in charge, how often they happen, and whether those in charge could have controlled what happened. This step is not designed to focus on finding someone to blame or punish, but rather to identify why the problems occurred so that the system can be changed, the employee involved can be trained, or the necessary changes can be made. The recovery effort begins where the failure analysis ends. The fourth step of the model is to select the appropriate recovery strategy for each type of failure. Strategies can range from a simple apology to some level of compensation to no response at all. During the planning phase, companies must consider the types of failures that might occur and prepare appropriate responses for them. The fifth step is the implementation of the recovery. Its success is grounded in how fair customers perceive it to be, in terms of the justice types we have just discussed. The sixth step is to review the recovery efforts and follow up to see if they were successful. Characteristics of a good recovery strategy. A service recovery strategy should satisfy several criteria. First, the strategy should ensure that the failure is addressed quickly and fixed in some positive way if possible. Second, recovery strategies must be communicated clearly to the employees charged with responding to customer dissatisfaction. The service people must know that the organization expects them to find and resolve customer problems as part of their jobs. Third, recovery strategies should be easy for the customer to find and use. Finally, they should be flexible enough to accommodate both the different types of failures and the different expectations that customers have of their guest experiences. The service recovery strategy developed should be based on management understanding that because the customer defines the quality of the service experience, the customer also defines its failures and the adequacy of the recovery strategies. No better makes it worse. The work of Hart, Heskett, and Sasser suggests that most recovery strategies are in serious need of improvement. More than half of organizational efforts to respond to consumer complaints actually reinforce negative reactions to the service. In trying to make things better, organizations may make them worse. Costs of failure to guests. One reason that customers view many recovery strategies as inadequate is that they do not really consider all of the costs to the customer. The effective organization will try to identify these costs and include some recognition of them in selecting the appropriate service recovery. After all, the customer will think that the fact that the service failed is not my fault. Making it right is not enough. Customers clearly think that when a failure occurs, organizations need to do more than simply make it right by replacing it or doing it over again. The outstanding organization systematically considers how to compensate guests for losses other than financial and makes extra effort to ensure that dissatisfied guests not only have their financial losses addressed in a recovery effort, but the guests have their ego and esteem needs met as well. Being wrong with dignity. Even when the guests themselves make mistakes, good organizations help to correct them with sensitivity. Even though such problems are not its fault, the guest-oriented organization believes that the guest needs to be wrong with dignity. It knows that guests who are angry at themselves may transfer some of that anger to the organization. To overcome this very human tendency, guest-centric organizations find ways to fix problems so that angry, frustrated people leave feeling good because a bad experience has not been allowed to overshadow or cancel out all the good. From a guestology view, a failure is an opportunity to improve. As is true of any data that report failures in any system, guest complaints are valuable and should be collected and analyzed regularly. In Disney, as the inventor of the term guestology, should be a guide to all who wish to create a guest-focused organization. Measure what you want to manage and, especially, everything that touches or impacts the guest. The best organizations view a service failure as a great opportunity to create an unforgettable, outrageously positive response. The organization extended its hospitality to a guest, then failed her. It should go the extra mile and then some to repair the damage. The right failure recovery strategy can turn an irate guest, ready to head for the competition, into a raving evangelist. Even if you are not responsible for a failure, recovering is an important way to get the guest's attention with impressive service. When no one expects you to fix someone else's mistake and you do it anyway, people are wowed. Service recovery is the integrative actions a company takes to re-establish customer satisfaction and loyalty after a service failure. Customer recovery, to ensure that failure incidents encourage learning and process improvement. Process recovery, and to train and reward employees for this purpose. Employee recovery. If the actions restore customer satisfaction and loyalty, then the recovery has succeeded from the customer's point of view, and that is the main thing. But from the company's perception, a truly successful service recovery will be a set of integrative actions that also improve the process and the employees involved. After successful service recovery, the people and the process are all better off.